They thought Earth was just another backward planet filled with primitive creatures stumbling around in dirt and leaves. The Galactic Council's greatest military minds laughed when they saw our soldiers, humans who painted their faces with mud, whispered to trees, and disappeared into green chaos they called jungles. These aliens commanded fleets that could shatter moons, wielded weapons that could vaporize cities, and conquered 1,000 worlds with mathematical precision. They had never met an enemy they couldn't catalog, analyze, and destroy with overwhelming technological superiority. But in the deepest Amazon, where ancient trees hold secrets older than their oldest civilizations, something stirred. Men and women who could track a whisper through miles of undergrowth, who moved like shadows through terrain that would swallow their mechanical armies whole, who understood that the jungle itself was the greatest weapon ever created. The invaders were about to learn that on Earth, the hunter and the hunted were about to switch places. And in this game, humanity had been practicing for millennia. The massive holographic display in the Galactic Council's war room showed Earth spinning slowly, its blue and green surface marked with red targeting coordinates. Admiral Vexcar of the Hegemony Fleet studied the primitive planet with the same bored expression he had worn while conquering 47 other worlds. His chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the harsh lights as his 4 arms gestured dismissively at the tactical data. Another backwater civilization. He clicked in his native tongue, the words automatically translated for the dozen other species represented in the room. Look at this pathetic technology readout. They still burn fossil fuels. Their fastest vehicles can barely break their own sound barrier. Their weapons fire simple projectiles using chemical explosions. General Throke of the Dominion war machine nodded his massive head, his red eyes scanning the intelligence reports. My scouts confirm the assessment. These humans have barely escaped their own gravity well. They fight each other with crude implements over patches of dirt. Most of them live in structures made from dead trees and hardened soil. Around the table, military commanders from a dozen alien civilizations murmured their agreement. They had seen this pattern before. Primitive species clinging to their home planets, using obsolete technology, following predictable military doctrines. It was almost routine by now. What concerns me, Admiral Vexka continued, is not their military capability, but the time this operation will cost us. The Hegemony Council grows impatient with lengthy campaigns. They want this planet's resources extracted and the population relocated within 6 rotations. The holographic display zoomed in on various regions of Earth. Sprawling cities appeared as glowing clusters of light, their geometric patterns clearly visible from orbit. Military installations showed up as rectangular compounds with obvious defensive perimeters.
Everything looked exactly as their xenobiologists had predicted. Organized, systematic, easily identifiable.
The humans appear to concentrate their populations in these urban centers, reported Intelligence Commander Zex, her crystalline form shimmering as she highlighted the major cities. Our preliminary scans indicate that destroying or capturing these locations would effectively neutralize over 60% of their population and 90% of their industrial capacity.
Standard urban conquest protocol, then. General Throck grunted. Orbital bombardment of military installations, followed by ground occupation of population centers.
We should have this completed in 3 rotations, possibly 2 if their resistance is as weak as these readings suggest. But then something on the display caught Admiral Vexcar's attention. Between the clearly defined cities and military bases were vast expanses of green. The computer labeled them as unexploited terrain and wilderness areas. To his analytical mind, they represented wasted space, land that could support countless processing facilities and resource extraction operations. What about these empty regions? He asked, gesturing toward the green zones with one of his secondary arms. Intelligence Commander Zix form pulsed briefly. Dense vegetation zones, mostly uninhabited. Our scans show scattered human populations living in primitive conditions. They appear to subsist on hunting and gathering, much like the pre-industrial populations we encountered on Kepler. 442b. Nothing strategically significant. No infrastructure? Minimal. Crude shelters, basic tools. No energy signatures above what we would expect from wood-burning fires. No communication networks. No defensive installations. She paused, accessing additional data. These humans seem to have deliberately avoided technological development. They live much as their ancestors did thousands of years ago. General Throke snorted, a sound like grinding metal. Primitives hiding in the forests? They will flee at the first sign of our forces. If they prove troublesome, we can always burn out their hiding places after we secure the strategic targets. The other commanders nodded approvingly. They had dealt with similar situations before. Sometimes primitive populations would scatter into wilderness areas when faced with superior military force, but they always eventually emerged seeking food or shelter. It was simply a matter of patience and systematic array of denial. Admiral Vexcar was about to dismiss the briefing when another display activated, showing detailed topographical data of these wilderness regions. The computer labeled them with various human terms: Amazon rainforest, Congo Basin, Southeast Asian jungle, Borneo, New Guinea highlands. The three-dimensional models revealed terrain unlike anything in their previous conquest experiences. Instead of the rolling plains and scattered forests common to most inhabited worlds, these regions showed incredibly dense vegetation, forming multiple canopy layers, creating what appeared to be entirely separate ecosystems stacked vertically. Rivers wound through the terrain in seemingly random patterns, creating countless islands and peninsulas. The forest floor was invisible from above, hidden beneath layers of green so thick that even their advanced senses could barely penetrate to ground level. "Fascinating," murmured Dr. Catherine, the expedition's chief xenobiologist. Her pale, elongated form leaned forward as her large eyes studied the data. "These vegetation zones appear to be significantly more complex than standard forest ecosystems. The biodiversity readings are extraordinary." "Complex how?" Admiral Vexgar asked, though he maintained his tone of disinterest. "The layer structure alone is remarkable. Ground level, understory, canopy, emergent layer, each supporting entirely different species. The root systems appear to be interconnected across vast distances. The moisture levels, temperature variations, acoustic properties." She trailed off as more data streamed across her console. "Admiral, I believe these regions might pose unexpected challenges for standard military operations." General Throck's laugh was like grinding gears. "Challenges? What challenge could trees pose to modern warfare? If the vegetation interferes with our operations, we simply remove it. Controlled burns, defoliation chemicals, orbital strikes. We have numerous options." "Of course," Dr. Catherine said quickly. "I merely meant that the terrain might slow our advance slightly. These jungle environments appear designed by evolution to impede movement, limit visibility, and restrict communication." "Then we avoid them," Admiral Vaxcar decided. "Standard doctrine applies. We secure the urban centers and industrial zones first. Once we control the strategic assets, any humans hiding in the wilderness become irrelevant. They can watch their civilization fall from their trees." The room filled with the various sounds that passed for laughter among the assembled species. The image was amusing. Primitive humans cowering in dense vegetation while their cities burned around them, too frightened and too backward to mount any meaningful resistance. But as the meeting continued, Dr. Catherine found herself studying the jungle data more carefully. Her scientific training had taught her to look beyond the obvious, and something about these readings didn't fit the pattern of a primitive ecosystem. The heat signatures were wrong, too dispersed, too mobile. The communication patterns showed faint but organized electromagnetic activity that didn't match any known natural phenomena. Most disturbing of all, when she enhanced the long-range sensor data and filtered out the vegetation interference, she could detect what appeared to be artificial structures distributed throughout these wilderness areas. Not cities or military bases, but something else. Small, concealed, connected by pathways that seemed to follow no logical geographic pattern. She was about to voice her concerns when Admiral Vexcar called for deployment orders. The invasion would begin in 12 hours, targeting the major population centers first. 3 battle groups would establish orbital supremacy while ground forces secured landing zones near the largest cities. Additional forces would occupy military installations and resource processing facilities. No mention was made of the wilderness areas. According to standard doctrine, they would be dealt with later, if at all. As the various commanders filed out to prepare their forces, Dr. Catherine remained behind, staring at the jungle data. She had spent her career studying alien ecosystems, and nothing in her experience had prepared her to interpret these readings. The vegetation patterns suggested intelligence. The heat signatures implied coordination. The electromagnetic activity hinted at communication methods far more sophisticated than anything they had expected to find on this backward planet. She tried to convince herself that she was overanalyzing the data. Every scientist knew the danger of seeing patterns where none existed, of attributing intention to natural phenomena. But her instruments were some of the most advanced in the galaxy, and they were telling her that something in those green depths was watching them. Something was waiting. 3 hours later, as the invasion fleet moved into position around Earth, deep in the Amazon basin, a figure emerged from what appeared to be solid jungle wall. Captain Maria Santos moved like a shadow given human form, her face painted with patterns that seemed to shift in the dappled light. She touched a device no larger than her fingertip, and across the planet, other shadows began to move. In the Congo, Sergeant Joseph Mbeki received the signal and smiled, his white teeth bright against his dark skin and the green and brown paint that made him invisible in his element. In Borneo, Lieutenant Chen Wei felt the subtle vibration through the soles of her feet and knew the time had come. In the mountains of Papua New Guinea, dozens of men and women who had never appeared on any census, who existed in no military database, who had been preparing their entire lives for this moment, began to gather their weapons. They were humanity's shadow army, the ones who had never forgotten that civilization was only possible because warriors guarded the edges of the firelight. They knew every tree, every stream, every rock in their domains. They could move through terrain that would stop an army, strike without warning, and vanish without a trace. And now, as alien ships blotted out the stars above their ancient homes, they prepared to remind the galaxy why humans had never been conquered by any force on Earth, because the most dangerous humans were the ones you never saw coming. The invasion of Earth was about to begin. But in the green depths where humanity had learned to hunt, the real war was already starting. The first hegemony dropships descended through Earth's atmosphere like metallic meteors, their thermal shields glowing orange against the dawn sky. Admiral Vexkar watched from his command ship as the initial assault forces targeted the major population centers exactly as planned. New York, London, Tokyo, Mumbai, all the urban centers that represented humanity's technological advancement and military coordination. The bombardment was precise and devastating. Orbital strikes eliminated military installations within minutes. Communication networks went dark. Government facilities disappeared in brilliant flashes of energy. From space, it appeared exactly like every other planetary conquest the hegemony had conducted. But something was wrong with the human response. "Admiral," Communication Officer Zelt reported, her voice carrying a note of confusion. "We are receiving surrender transmissions from the urban centers, but the signal patterns are unusual." Vexkar turned his attention to the communication data streaming across his console. The messages were coming from the correct locations, using standard diplomatic frequencies, but the content was unexpected. Instead of the desperate pleas for mercy or demands for negotiation he had heard from 100 other conquered worlds, these transmissions were brief and oddly specific. "This is General Harrison of the United Nations Defense Force," came one transmission from what had been the Pentagon. "We acknowledge your superior firepower and formally surrender all conventional military assets. We request immediate establishment of communication protocols for negotiating terms of occupation." Similar messages arrived from military headquarters around the globe, professional, businesslike, almost as if the humans had been expecting this outcome. There was no rage, no defiance, no desperate last-minute attempts to launch suicidal counterattacks. "Efficient," General Throck commented approvingly. "These humans understand the futility of resistance. Their leadership appears more pragmatic than most primitive species we encounter." But Intelligence Commander Zix was studying her readings with growing concern. "Admiral, I am detecting anomalous activity in the wilderness regions. Electromagnetic signatures suggesting coordinated movement patterns." "Define anomalous," Vexkar ordered. "Brief. Encrypted communications bursts originating from multiple points throughout the jungle zones. The signals appear to be using quantum encryption methods that—" She paused, rechecking her data. "Admiral, these communication protocols are more advanced than our own." The command deck fell silent. General Throck's red eyes narrowed as he leaned forward. "That is impossible. Our scans showed no advanced technology in those regions." "The signals are definitely present," Zix insisted, "but they last only microseconds before shutting down. I can barely detect them, and only because I am specifically monitoring those frequencies." She highlighted locations on the tactical display where the communications had originated. They appear to be operating from positions deep within the vegetation zones, using terrain features to mask their transmissions. Dr. Catherine, who had been monitoring the biological data from the planet's surface, suddenly spoke up. "Admiral, I believe we may have made an error in our intelligence assessment." "Explain." "The humans we observed in the wilderness areas, we assumed they were primitive because they use basic tools and live in simple structures. But what if they chose that lifestyle deliberately? What if technological simplicity was a tactical decision rather than an indication of limited capability?" Before anyone could respond, the first reports began arriving from the ground forces. The urban conquests had proceeded exactly as expected. Overwhelming orbital superiority had eliminated organized resistance within hours. Human military personnel were surrendering in good order, following their officers' commands to cooperate with occupation forces. But then came a transmission from Lieutenant Commander Grix, leading the landing force near Manaus, Brazil, at the edge of the Amazon basin. "Command, this is Grix. We have established the perimeter around the urban target, but we are receiving unusual readings from the forest zones adjacent to our position." "Clarify unusual," Admiral Vexkai responded. "Heat signatures consistent with organized movement patterns. Large groups maintaining coordinated positions approximately 3 kilometers into the vegetation zone. They appear to be observing us." General Throck activated his personal communication link to the ground forces. "Lieutenant Commander, are you suggesting that primitive forest dwellers pose some kind of threat to a modern military force?" There was a pause before Grix responded, and when he did, his voice carried a note of uncertainty that was distinctly out of character for a hegemony officer. "General, request permission to conduct reconnaissance of the forest perimeter. Something about the human positioning doesn't conform to expected patterns for frightened primitives." "Granted. Take a full patrol and investigate. But remember, these are beings who live in trees and hunt with pointed sticks. Do not embarrass the hegemony by treating them as serious opponents." 20 minutes later, Lieutenant Commander Grix and 12 elite hegemony soldiers entered the Amazon rainforest. Their powered armor provided complete environmental protection, enhanced strength and speed, and sensor capabilities that could detect a heartbeat from a kilometer away. Their plasma rifles could vaporize any known organic material. Their tactical computers were linked to orbital surveillance and could coordinate fire support that could level mountains. They never sent another transmission. For 6 hours, Admiral Vexkar's command staff tried to re-establish contact. Orbital scans showed the patrol's heat signatures moving deeper into the forest, then stopping, then dispersing, then disappearing entirely. Emergency beacons went silent. Even the powered armor's quantum communicators fell offline. "Equipment malfunction," General Throck insisted. "These primitive environments can interfere with delicate electronics. Humidity, electromagnetic anomalies from all that vegetation." But Dr. Kethrian was studying biological readings from the forest floor, and what she saw made her 4-chambered heart skip a beat. The patrol's final positions were marked by sudden increases in soil acidity and rapid vegetation growth. Plants were literally growing over the spots where the soldiers had vanished, as if the jungle itself was erasing all evidence of their presence. "Admiral," she said quietly, "I recommend we halt all ground operations in wilderness areas until we can conduct a more thorough assessment." "Absolutely not," General Throck snapped. "We will not be intimidated by missing communications and sensor ghosts. I will personally lead a battalion into those forests and eliminate whatever primitive threat these humans think they can mount." But before he could issue orders, new reports began arriving from ground forces around the globe. Near Kinshasa, in the Congo, a Dominion reconnaissance team had gone missing after investigating movement in the forest. Outside Jakarta, an entire hegemony platoon had failed to return from a routine patrol along the jungle perimeter. Each incident followed the same pattern. Professional soldiers with advanced equipment entering wilderness areas and simply disappearing. No weapons fire, no distress calls, no evidence of conventional combat. They went into the green and vanished as if the earth itself had swallowed them. Meanwhile, the conquered human cities remained completely cooperative. Government officials met with occupation forces, providing detailed information about infrastructure and resources. Military personnel helped establish new administrative systems. The urban population seemed resigned to their new circumstances, following all directives without resistance. But Intelligence Commander Zix was detecting something else in her data streams. Hidden within the routine administrative communications between human officials and their alien occupiers were patterns that looked suspiciously like coded messages. Subtle variations in timing, word choices, even the order of submitted reports suggested a coordinated information exchange. "Admiral," she reported, "I believe the human surrender may be a deception." "What kind of deception?" Vexkar demanded. "The urban populations are feeding us accurate information about civilian infrastructure, but I detect systematic gaps in data regarding anything with potential military applications. They are telling us where to find schools and hospitals and shopping centers, but remaining curiously vague about the locations of certain industrial facilities, communication networks, and transportation choke points. So they are withholding some information. That is expected from a defeated population. No, sir, this is more systematic than simple non-cooperation. They appear to be deliberately directing our attention toward targets that provide no strategic advantage, while concealing anything that could support continued resistance operations. Before Admiral Vexkar could respond, the strategic situation changed dramatically. Monitoring stations across the planet began detecting coordinated movement in wilderness areas worldwide. Not random displacement of frightened populations, but organized repositioning consistent with military operations. Dr. Catherine's biological sensors showed something even more disturbing. The jungle ecosystems were responding to human presence in ways that defied natural behavior. Plants were growing to obscure pathways minutes after humans passed through them. Animal populations were moving in coordination with human groups, as if serving as scouts and sentries. Even weather patterns seemed to be shifting, creating localized fog and rain clouds that concealed movement from orbital observation. "This is impossible," General Throke insisted. "Primitive humans cannot coordinate environmental systems. They lack the technology for weather modification or biological control." But Lieutenant Commander Yarix, monitoring communications from orbit, had detected something that changed everything. Deep in the Amazon, his sensors had briefly picked up a transmission using protocols that were not just advanced but completely unknown. The signal had lasted only seconds before sophisticated jamming made it impossible to track, but in those few moments, he had heard something that made his carapace crawl with unease. The transmission had been in multiple human languages simultaneously, coordinating positions and objectives across vast distances with a precision that suggested intelligence networks far more sophisticated than anything they had expected. But more disturbing was the content. These humans were discussing the alien invasion forces with detailed tactical knowledge that should have been impossible for primitives to possess. They knew the exact capabilities of hegemony weapons. They understood the operational limitations of alien armor systems. They had somehow identified weaknesses in technology that had conquered half the galaxy. "Admiral," Yarix reported reluctantly, "I believe we may be facing an enemy that has been studying us for much longer than we have been studying them." The command deck fell silent as the implications became clear. The humans had not been surprised by the invasion. They had been prepared. The urban populations had surrendered not from defeat, but as part of a larger strategy. The primitives in the wilderness were not hiding from superior technology. They were hunting it. And somewhere in the green depths of the planet below, an enemy that understood both the jungle and the galaxy was preparing to teach the hegemony the difference between conquering a civilization and conquering the humans who built it. Captain Maria Santos crouched motionless in the canopy 40 meters above the forest floor, her breathing synchronized with the rhythm of the wind through the leaves. Through her scope, she watched the hegemony patrol moving through the jungle below with all the subtlety of a freight train. 12 alien soldiers in powered armor, their senses sweeping back and forth in predictable patterns, following a game trail that her people had carefully modified to lead them exactly where she wanted them. The aliens had no idea they were walking through a killing field that had been 3 weeks in preparation. Maria touched her throat mic with one finger, sending a signal so brief it would register as background noise to alien sensors. Around her, invisible in the green maze of the rainforest, 43 other humans received the message and began their final approach. They moved like ghosts through terrain they had known since childhood, using pathways that existed only in their collective memory and on no map ever drawn. These were not the primitives the aliens expected to find. Maria Santos held advanced degrees in xenobiology and theoretical physics from institutions the invaders had never heard of. Her second-in-command, Sergeant Carlos Mendoza, had spent 10 years developing asymmetric warfare tactics specifically designed to counter technologically superior opponents. Every member of her unit possessed skills that spanned both cutting-edge military science and ancient jungle craft passed down through generations. They had been preparing for this day since the first alien signals had been detected at the edge of the solar system 6 months ago. The Hegemony Patrol paused at a stream crossing, exactly as Maria had predicted they would. Lieutenant Commander Grix raised his hand for a halt, his sensors detecting what appeared to be structural anomalies in the water. To alien technology, the carefully arranged logs and vegetation looked like natural debris. To human eyes, they formed a bridge that could support the weight of powered armor while channeling the patrol into a precise location. "Movement patterns suggest the missing teams came through this area," Grix reported to his unit. "Maintain defensive formation and scan for technological signatures." Maria almost smiled. The alien was looking for technology in the traditional sense: metals, electronics, energy sources. He had no way to detect weapons carved from ironwood and tipped with compounds extracted from plants that had been perfecting toxins for millions of years. His sensors could not identify threats made from materials that registered as part of the natural environment. The hegemony soldiers began crossing the stream, their heavy footsteps creating vibrations that traveled through the carefully prepared logs, directly to pressure sensors that Maria's team had positioned throughout the area. Each step provided precise location data that fed into targeting calculations performed by human minds rather than computers. When the last alien reached the center of the crossing, Maria gave the signal. The jungle came alive. What appeared to be fallen trees suddenly snapped upright, revealing themselves as camouflaged humans who had been lying motionless for hours. Darts flew from blowguns carved to match the surrounding vegetation, their tips carrying toxins that could penetrate the microgaps between armor plates. Weighted nets woven from synthetic fibers dropped from the canopy, their mesh designed specifically to jam the servo systems that powered alien exoskeletons. But the most devastating attack came from the forest floor itself. Hidden beneath what appeared to be natural root systems were charges made from organic compounds that had been fermenting in sealed chambers for months. When detonated, they created clouds of spores that confused every sensor system the aliens possessed, while introducing biological agents that began consuming the aliens' equipment from within. Lieutenant Commander Grix spun in a circle, his weapons targeting system unable to distinguish between actual threats and false positives generated by the spore clouds. His plasma rifle fired repeatedly, the energy bolts striking trees that had been treated with compounds that caused them to release more concealing particles when heated. Command, this is Grix. We're under attack by, I cannot determine the nature of the attacking force. Sensors are compromised. Request immediate backup. The response came from Admiral Vexgar himself. Lieutenant Commander, you are equipped with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. What could possibly prevent you from neutralizing primitive forest dwellers? Grix never got the chance to answer. Sergeant Mendoza had worked his way within striking distance using a ghillie suit that incorporated living plants, creating a camouflage system that literally grew around him as he moved. His weapon was not a gun or a blade, but a device that generated electromagnetic pulses tuned specifically to the frequency that hegemony armor used for internal communication between systems. One touch was enough to turn the aliens' own armor into a cage. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out with devastating precision. Human fighters emerged from concealment positions that had been occupied for days, striking with weapons that exploited specific vulnerabilities in alien technology. They used the jungle itself as their arsenal, turning every vine, every branch, every root into a potential weapon. Within 10 minutes, the entire hegemony patrol was down. But unlike previous encounters, Maria's team did not simply eliminate the aliens and vanish. Instead, they carefully collected the disabled soldiers, stripping them of weapons and communication gear before applying medical treatment to keep them alive. Why preserve them? Asked Elena Vasquez, one of Maria's newer recruits who had joined the unit just 3 months ago. Because dead aliens tell us nothing, Maria replied, securing the captives with bindings made from specially treated plant fibers. But living ones can provide intelligence about their technology, tactics, and plans. Plus, Admiral Vexgar is about to learn that his forces don't just disappear in our jungle, they become sources of information about his own operations. Miles away, in the command center that Maria's people had carved out of the living rock beneath the forest, Dr. James Harrison analyzed the recovered alien equipment with instruments that looked like they belonged in a primitive workshop, but performed functions that would have impressed hegemony scientists. Every piece of captured technology was carefully studied, reverse-engineered and adapted for human use. The aliens thought humans were primitive because they lived in the jungle and used simple tools. They never imagined that behind the simple tools lay sophisticated understanding of both advanced science and ancient wisdom. They could not conceive of an enemy that could build quantum communication devices from materials that grew on trees, or develop weapons that used biological processes to defeat mechanical systems. In orbit above, Admiral Vexgar was discovering the true scope of his problem. What he had initially dismissed as isolated incidents involving missing patrols was revealing itself as a coordinated campaign being conducted across every wilderness area on the planet. Teams were disappearing in the Amazon, the Congo, Southeast Asia and Papua New Guinea with identical patterns. But now, instead of simply vanishing, they were being captured alive and their equipment was being studied. Admiral, Intelligence Commander Zix reported, our missing personnel are being held at locations throughout the wilderness zones. We are receiving proof-of-life transmissions, but they contain embedded data that suggests our soldiers are being systematically interrogated. How is that possible? General Throck demanded. Hegemony personnel are trained to resist primitive interrogation techniques. The techniques being used do not appear to be primitive, Zix replied reluctantly. The captured soldiers report being questioned by individuals who demonstrate detailed knowledge of hegemony technology, tactics, and strategic objectives.
Their interrogators appear to understand our military doctrine better than some of our own officers.
Dr. Catherine, who had been studying the biological data from the planet's surface with growing amazement, finally spoke up.
Admiral, I believe we have fundamentally misunderstood the nature of human civilization. Explain. We assumed that technological advancement and living in harmony with natural systems were mutually exclusive. But what if these humans represent an evolutionary path we never considered? What if they deliberately chose to integrate advanced technology with biological systems rather than replacing those systems? She activated a display showing microscopic analysis of captured human equipment. These weapons appear to be grown rather than manufactured. The communication systems use biological components that interface directly with plant networks. Even their camouflage incorporates living organisms that respond to neural commands. Impossible, General Throck snorted. Technology requires industrial infrastructure. Advanced materials require processing facilities. You cannot grow quantum computers in dirt. But the evidence was mounting with each passing hour. Human forces were demonstrating capabilities that defied every assumption the hegemony had made about primitive civilizations. They possessed weapons that functioned perfectly in environments that would disable conventional technology. Their communication networks operated through biological systems that were impossible to detect or jam using standard methods. Their intelligence gathering was so sophisticated that they seemed to anticipate hegemony movements before orders were even issued. Most disturbing of all, they were learning. Each captured piece of alien equipment was being analyzed and adapted. Human weapons were becoming more effective against hegemony forces with each encounter. The primitives were rapidly incorporating alien technology into their biological systems, creating hybrid weapons that combined the best features of both approaches. Admiral Vexgar faced a realization that no hegemony commander had confronted in 300 years of conquest. He was not fighting primitives. He was fighting an enemy that had chosen a different path to technological advancement, one that his civilization had never considered and could not understand. In the jungle below, Maria Santos received a communication from cells operating in 12 different countries, all reporting similar successes. The hegemony had made the fatal error of underestimating their opponents. Now the hunters were learning what it meant to become the hunted. The real war was just beginning, and the aliens were about to discover that on Earth the jungle always won. Admiral Vexgar stood before the massive tactical display in his command center, watching red indicators spread across Earth's wilderness regions like a plague. Each marker represented lost contact with ground forces, captured equipment, or failed objectives. What had begun as a routine planetary conquest was rapidly becoming the greatest military disaster in hegemony history. "Report," he ordered, his voice carrying the strain of a commander watching his certainties crumble. General Throck, his massive frame hunched over intelligence reports, looked up with something Vexgar had never seen before in his crimson eyes: uncertainty. Losses continue to mount across all operational theaters. 47 patrols missing or captured in the last rotation alone. Equipment losses now exceed the total armament of 3 standard battle groups. And our captive personnel? Still alive, according to intercepted transmissions. But the intelligence they are providing to enemy forces is comprehensive. Throck hesitated, a gesture that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. "Admiral, our own soldiers are being turned into intelligence assets against us. They are not just answering questions, they are being convinced to cooperate voluntarily." The implications struck Vexgar like a physical blow. Hegemony personnel were selected for absolute loyalty and psychological resilience. The idea that primitive humans could somehow convince elite alien soldiers to betray their own forces suggested psychological manipulation techniques far beyond anything a primitive species should possess. Dr. Catherine activated a new display showing biological analysis from the latest encounters. "Admiral, we have identified the mechanism. The humans are using a combination of natural psychoactive compounds and sophisticated psychological techniques. They are not torturing our soldiers. They are healing them." Healing them? Our personnel report being treated with medical care superior to our own field medicine. Injuries that would normally require regeneration pods are being healed using biological compounds that work faster and more effectively than synthetic alternatives. But these treatments also include neurochemical modifications that enhance empathy and reduce aggressive tendencies. Intelligence Commander Zix added her analysis. The captured soldiers described feeling clearer, less angry, more able to understand different perspectives. They report that their human captors spend considerable time explaining human culture and environmental philosophy. They are not being brainwashed. They are being educated. And they find these explanations convincing? Disturbingly so. Many report experiencing what they describe as ecological awakening, a recognition that their previous assumptions about the relationship between technology and nature were fundamentally flawed. Some have requested to remain with their captors rather than be exchanged for human prisoners. The command center fell silent as the senior staff absorbed this information. The idea that their most elite soldiers could be turned into willing allies of their captors challenged every assumption about alien psychology and human capability. But the real shock came when Lieutenant Commander Yarix announced that he was receiving a priority transmission from the planet's surface, a direct communication from the human resistance addressed specifically to Admiral Vexgar. "Put it through," Vexgar ordered. The voice that emerged from the communication system was calm, educated, and spoke accented galactic standard that was technically perfect. "Admiral Vexgar, this is Dr. Maria Santos of the Terran Forest Alliance. I believe it is time we spoke directly." "Dr. Santos?" Vexgar repeated the title with surprise. "Theoretical xenobiology and interspecies communication, with specializations in ecosystem integration and bioengineering. I completed my doctoral studies through distance learning programs with 3 universities on Kepler 186. Before your species imposed the technological quarantine on Earth." The alien command staff exchanged glances. Kepler 186F was a highly advanced world with educational institutions that produced some of the galaxy's finest scientists. The idea that a human living in Earth's rainforest held legitimate advanced degrees from such institutions was nearly impossible to accept. "That is impossible," General Throck interjected. "Earth was classified as a primitive world. Academic exchange with advanced civilizations is strictly forbidden for species below technological threshold 7. Maria's voice carried what might have been amusement. "General, humans have been monitoring galactic communications and participating in interstellar academic networks for over 60 years. We simply chose not to advertise our presence. We learned long ago that it was safer to be underestimated." Dr. Catherine leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding protocol. "Dr. Popse, Santos, our analysis suggests that human technology follows biological rather than mechanical principles. How is this possible?" "Because we never forgot that we are part of nature rather than separate from it," Maria replied. "Your species developed technology by imposing artificial systems on natural ones. We developed technology by working with biological systems and enhancing their existing capabilities. The result is more efficient, more sustainable, and far more adaptable than anything achieved through purely mechanical approaches." "You claim to be more advanced than the hegemony?" Admiral Vexgar demanded. "Not more advanced, differently advanced. Your technology excels at brute force applications and standardized solutions. Ours excels at adaptation and integration. Your weapons are powerful in predictable environments. Ours become more effective in complex ones." To prove her point, Maria transmitted technical specifications for some of the weapons her forces had used against hegemony troops. The alien scientists studied the data with growing amazement. The designs showed technology that seemed to violate several basic principles of engineering, until they realized that the weapons were not manufactured, they were grown. The communication devices used quantum-entangled particles that were naturally produced by specially cultivated fungi. The camouflage systems incorporated living organisms that responded to neural commands through biological interfaces that had been refined over generations. Even the projectile weapons used organic chemistry to achieve effects that conventional technology accomplished through complex mechanical systems. "This is extraordinary," Dr. Catherine whispered, studying the schematics. "You have achieved technological capabilities equivalent to our own using completely different methodological approaches. And we have been sharing this knowledge with your captured personnel," Maria added. "They are discovering that cooperation between species produces superior results to conquest." Many have expressed interest in continuing collaborative research projects rather than returning to military service. General Throck's rage finally erupted. "Are you suggesting that hegemony soldiers would choose to serve primitive forest dwellers rather than their own civilization? I am suggesting that intelligent beings, when freed from artificial constraints on their thinking, and given access to new perspectives, often make choices that surprise those who assume they knew what those beings wanted." Maria transmitted another set of data, recordings of interviews with captured hegemony soldiers. The aliens listened with growing dismay as their own personnel described their experiences with human captors. The soldiers spoke of medical treatment that had not only healed their physical injuries but had somehow reduced the chronic stress and aggression that hegemony military conditioning created. They described educational sessions where humans had shared knowledge about biological technology that their own scientists had never imagined possible. Most disturbing, they spoke of feeling hope for the first time since their military service had begun. Hope for a future where different species work together, rather than conquering each other. Hope for technology that enhanced life rather than merely controlling it. This is psychological manipulation, General Throck insisted. You are using alien compounds to alter their brain chemistry. We are using natural compounds to treat the brain chemistry alterations that your military conditioning imposed on them. Maria corrected. Your soldiers arrive suffering from artificially induced stress disorders, suppressed empathy, and neurochemical imbalances that make them incapable of considering non-violent solutions to complex problems. We simply return them to their natural psychological baseline. Admiral Vexkar found himself confronting a possibility that challenged everything he believed about galactic civilization. What do you want? Immediate cessation of hostile activities against Earth, withdrawal of all invasion forces, and formal diplomatic recognition of Terra as a sovereign world capable of choosing its own path of development. And if we refuse? Then you will continue losing soldiers and equipment at an accelerating rate until you are forced to withdraw anyway. But you will have squandered an opportunity to learn from a civilization that has achieved things your species never considered possible. Maria transmitted one final piece of data, a comprehensive analysis of hegemony military capabilities, based on equipment her forces had captured and personnel they had interviewed. The analysis was more detailed and accurate than anything in the aliens' own intelligence files. It revealed weaknesses in their tactical doctrine, inefficiencies in their technology, and blind spots in their strategic thinking that explained how primitive forest dwellers had been defeating the most advanced military force in the galaxy. Santos. Admiral Vexkar said slowly, "You are offering us a choice between withdrawal and education. I am offering you the same choice we offered your soldiers, the opportunity to learn something new about the universe. The question is whether your pride will allow you to accept knowledge from a source you previously considered inferior." The communication ended, leaving the alien command staff in stunned silence. They had come to conquer Earth, but instead had discovered a civilization that challenged their fundamental assumptions about technology, intelligence, and the nature of progress itself. The primitives had become the teachers, and the conquerors faced a choice they had never had to make before: learn or continue losing a war they could never win. 6 months after the failed invasion, the Amazon basin had been transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. A joint research facility where alien and human scientists worked together to explore the boundaries between biological and mechanical technology. Dr. Maria Santos walked through laboratories that had been grown rather than built, their living walls filtering air and regulating temperature through natural processes that made conventional environmental systems seem crude by comparison. Beside her walked Dr. Catherine, the former hegemony xenobiologist whose scientific curiosity had ultimately proven stronger than her military loyalty. The alien scientist moved with a grace that her species rarely displayed, the chronic stress of militaristic society having been gradually replaced by the calm alertness that came from working in harmony with natural systems. "The neural interface trials are exceeding all projections," Catherine reported, her translated voice carrying excitement that would have been impossible in her previous military role. "Human volunteers are achieving direct communication with the mycorrhizal networks at depths we never imagined possible. The information processing capacity appears to scale exponentially with the size of the forest ecosystem." Maria nodded, reviewing data on a display that was actually a specially cultivated organism that could process and present information through controlled bioluminescence. "And the hegemony volunteers? Lieutenant Commander Grix has made the most remarkable progress. His species' natural neural plasticity is proving highly compatible with organic interface technology. Yesterday he successfully coordinated simultaneous communication with fungi networks across 3 continents." They paused at an observation window that looked down into a chamber where the most ambitious project of the human-alien collaboration was taking place. Former hegemony soldiers worked alongside human researchers to develop what they called hybrid consciousness, the ability to temporarily merge their awareness with forest ecosystems to gain access to information processing capabilities that exceeded anything achieved by purely mechanical computers. The implications were staggering. Instead of conquering natural systems to extract resources, it was becoming possible to partner with those systems to achieve technological capabilities that neither biological nor mechanical approaches could accomplish alone. "Dr. Santos," came a voice from the communication system, which was actually a network of specially trained birds whose songs carried encoded information across vast distances. "Admiral Vexkar is requesting the scheduled progress briefing." Maria smiled. The former hegemony commander had surprised everyone by volunteering to serve as liaison between the research facility and the galactic community. His military training had made him initially resistant to human approaches, but his scientific background had eventually overcome his cultural conditioning. He now spent most of his time documenting human biotechnological achievements and communicating their implications to other species throughout the galaxy. "Tell the Admiral we will meet him at the canopy platform in 20 minutes, Maria replied. They made their way upward through the facility using transport systems that would have seemed impossible to alien engineers just months earlier. Living walkways supported by the forest canopy itself carried them smoothly upward, with the trees adjusting their growth patterns in real time to accommodate the pathway. Emergency systems were integrated directly into the forest ecosystem, making conventional safety equipment unnecessary. At the platform, Admiral Vexkar was studying reports from across the galaxy, with the intense focus that had once made him a feared military commander. But now his attention was devoted to documenting a revolution in thinking that was spreading from world to world as news of the Earth experiments reached other civilizations. "The response continues to exceed expectations," he reported as Maria and Catherine joined him. 17 species have requested diplomatic contact with Terra to discuss collaborative research opportunities. The Kalari Collective wants to explore applications of bio-neural interfaces for their crystal-based consciousness networks. The Faxian Republic is interested in adaptive architecture that integrates with their volcanic environments. "Any resistance?" Maria asked. "Significant opposition from traditional military establishments, but overwhelming enthusiasm from scientific communities. The concepts we are demonstrating here challenge fundamental assumptions that have guided galactic civilization for thousands of years." Dr. Catherine activated a holographic display showing communication networks that now span dozens of star systems. "The biological communication protocols developed here have proven capable of instantaneous information transfer across galactic distances. Several species are reporting success with organic quantum entanglement systems that make conventional, faster-than-light communication seem primitive." Maria studied the data with satisfaction. What had begun as a desperate defensive action by Earth's forest communities was becoming a transformation of interstellar civilization. The hybrid technologies being developed in the Amazon were spreading throughout the galaxy, offering alternatives to the resource-intensive industrial approaches that had dominated technological development for millennia. "What about the hegemony leadership?" she asked. Admiral Vexkar's expression became complex. "The Council remains divided. Progressive factions are advocating for immediate adoption of biotechnological integration programs. Conservative elements insist that our current systems are sufficient and that biological approaches represent dangerous unknowns. General Throw continues to argue that military solutions are preferable to diplomatic ones." "And the soldiers who have worked here? That is where the real change is occurring," Vexkar admitted. "Personnel who have participated in the collaboration programs are returning to their home worlds with perspectives that their military training never anticipated. They speak of feeling more connected to their own natural environments, more capable of creative problem-solving, less driven by aggressive impulses. Many are requesting assignment to exploration and research missions rather than conquest operations." Maria walked to the edge of the platform, looking out over the vast green canopy that stretched to the horizon. Below them, the Amazon pulsed with life that was both ancient and constantly evolving. The forest had been adapting and learning for millions of years, and now it was teaching those lessons to species from across the galaxy. Dr. Manuel Santos. Catherine said, "There is something I need to understand. How did your people know that this approach would work? How did you predict that biological systems could achieve technological capabilities equivalent to mechanical ones?" Maria was quiet for a moment before responding. "Because we never stopped listening to what the forest was trying to teach us. Every human culture that developed in close contact with natural systems understood that those systems were processing information, solving problems, and adapting to changing conditions with sophistication that mechanical systems could not match."
She gestured toward the canopy around them.
"This forest has been running complex calculations for millions of years. It processes weather data, optimizes resource distribution, coordinates defensive responses to threats, and maintains stable population dynamics across thousands of species. It does all of this without any central control system, using distributed processing networks that make our most advanced computers seem simple by comparison. But how did you know it was possible to interface with these systems? Because indigenous peoples around the world had been doing it for thousands of years, Maria explained. They called it different things, talking to the spirits of the forest, reading the wisdom of the trees, understanding the voice of the land. Modern science dismissed these practices as superstition, but they were actually describing genuine communication with biological information networks. Admiral Vexkar studied this explanation with the analytical mind that had made him a successful military commander. So the humans who defeated my invasion forces were not primitive forest dwellers. They were scientists working with technologies that galactic civilization had never considered. They were both, Maria replied. The most advanced technology we possess is also the oldest wisdom our species has learned. The future of galactic civilization may depend on rediscovering truths that many cultures knew thousands of years ago. A soft tone from the communication system indicated an incoming priority transmission. Admiral Vexkar activated the receiver, which manifested as a pattern of light among the leaves above their heads. Admiral, this is Dr. Zenith of the Tau Ceti Research Collective. We have successfully replicated the organic quantum interface protocols developed at the Terra facility. Our preliminary results suggest that biological consciousness integration may be the key to faster-than-light travel without the energy requirements of conventional hyperdrive systems. The three scientists exchanged looks of amazement. If biological systems could accomplish interstellar travel more efficiently than mechanical ones, the implications for galactic civilization were beyond calculation. Dr. Santos, Admiral Vexkar said formally, on behalf of progressive elements throughout the hegemony and allied species, I want to express our gratitude for humanity's willingness to share knowledge that could transform galactic civilization. Admiral, Maria replied, Earth has never sought to conquer other worlds, but we are happy to share what we have learned with species that approach us as partners rather than invaders. As the sun set through the forest canopy, the three scientists continued their planning for experiments that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of what was possible when intelligence worked with natural systems rather than trying to dominate them. The invasion that had been intended to subjugate humanity had instead introduced the galaxy to possibilities that none of their civilizations had imagined. In the depths of the Amazon, where ancient trees held wisdom older than most galactic civilizations, the future was being written not with laser weapons and mechanical minds, but with living systems that had been perfecting themselves since the dawn of life itself. The primitives had become the teachers, and the galaxy was finally ready to learn. The jungle had won, not through conquest, but by demonstrating that cooperation was always more powerful than domination. And in that victory, every species in the galaxy had found new possibilities for their own evolution.